someone just give me a say yes? Can you see it, Damon?
Yes, yeah.
Fab. Damon can see it. That's good. I'm going to just minimize this so that I can see my screen. So welcome everyone to our webinar today. This is development theories, their influence on the EYFS and on your practice and my practice. And it's a Stronger Practice Hub webinar with myself, Kim Barnetson, and usually we have Lisa, but I haven't seen her this evening. Perhaps she'll pop along later. And Damon from the barn. And Damon's going to be our IT person as usual today because I can't see the chat while I'm presenting. So he'll interrupt me if I need to know of anything important in the chat. And the same goes for all of you. Actually, please feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt me and ask questions or tell me things. It's absolutely fine. The more interactive, the better. So let's get started. Here's our agenda for tonight. We're going to think about what is a development theory and why are they used to inform the EYFS. I've picked out, anyone that knows anything about development theories will know there are a lot of them. I've picked out 4 development theories that I think you may have heard of, you may be slightly familiar with, but we're going to look at them in a little bit more depth. So we're going to think about Piaget and his cognitive development theory, Bandura and his social learning theory, Bowlby and attachment theory, and Maslow and his humanist psychology. And then we're going to have a think about why are all these theorists white and male? And are there other theorists who aren't white and male? And I'm pleased to say there are. What is the future of development theories? Then we're going to have a quick summing up. We've got time for a chat. Then we're going to talk about our next webinar. And I've put lots, for this one, there are lots and lots of further reading links at the end. Because if one of these theories sort of speaks to you and you think, hang on, I'm really interested in Bowlby, I need to find out more, then there are lots of links there where you can find things out. And if I can help with anything like that, you can just email me and I'm very happy to go over things again with anyone or go into deeper chats about things. So let's have a think. What is a development theory and why are they used to influence the EYFS? So a development theory is an explanation of how babies and children develop, and this can cover any or all aspects of development. Some theorists focus just on physical development, some on cognitive development, some on emotional development. It's just how do babies develop? How do we as humans develop? A development theory seeks to explain the factors which might support or hinder development. And because development theories are usually backed up by research-based evidence through experimentation and testing, they can be shown to be effective at supporting development. So we can see which factors are supporting development and which aren't. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Because we want to support development, to use those proven factors in our work in the EYFS, which underpins everything we do. So these theories are often adopted by agencies such as the Department for Education as best practice. Understanding these theories that underpin the EYFS helps us to make sense of changes and different things that we might see coming up in the EYFS. Or if you're like me and you've been in early years quite a long time, you'll have noticed quite a lot of changes over the years. And it helps us to understand why those changes are happening, why we're focusing on certain parts of child development and moving away from other approaches that we might have had in the past. And that enables us to be reflective practitioners. And we know that when you're a reflective practitioner, that's when you're an effective practitioner and you're supporting the children to the best of your ability. So that's what a development theory is. It's working out how our brains, bodies and emotions develop. And because it's based in science, it can be proven. So these approaches can be proven. And so that's why we use them in the EYFS. Oh, I forgot to say, you're going to need your phones to do Slido. So we've only got one slide on here this evening, which is which development theories or theorists are you aware of? Sometimes you might say they're approaches, but like the Reggio Emilia would be an approach rather than a theory. But for the purposes of tonight, we'll just call it all the same thing. So if anyone wants to join in, please scan the QR code and pop in anything you already know about development theories or anyone you've already heard of. Because I know that you're all excellent practitioners already, and you're probably aware of one or two at least. Montessori, lovely, thank you. Erickson, lovely, well done. Skinner, yeah. Behavioural development. Froebel, yeah. Vygotsky, one of my favourites. Anyone who's come to any of my webinars has probably heard me mention Vygotsky. Maslow, great. We're going to be talking about Maslow later. As you can see, excuse me, I could have picked any or all of these. Piaget, thank you. We will be covering Piaget. There are so many development theories, and it was quite hard to narrow them down. And I did have a lot more listed, and then I decided to just pick these four because they seem to fit in quite nicely to what we're talking about. Thank you, everyone. That's really helpful. So you're already very knowledgeable about these different types of theorists, and you may already understand how they underpin the work that we do. Some of you might be in settings that particularly focus on one theorist, like you might be in a Montessori setting. Leuven, like in the Leuven scale, the engagement scale, isn't it? So some of you may be in settings where you're focused on a particular theorist, or like me, and I think like a lot of you, you might take bits and pieces from them. Pickler, another one of my favourites. I'm a very big Pickler fan. I think we've got one more word coming in, and then I'm going to skip forward to the next slide just to see. Oh, who was the next one? Oh, Bowlby. Well done. Thank you. I think if you haven't heard of Bowlby, you will have heard of him by the end of this session, and you will already have heard of his theory. I can guarantee it if you're in early years. Thank you, everyone. That's really helpful. So we're already working with people here that, you know, tonight that you've already got this sort of background knowledge, but it's still quite helpful to think to understand why we work in the way we do. So let's start off with Piaget. Born in 1896, died in 1980. He was a Swiss psychologist. And his key question was, how does knowledge grow? How is cognitive development, how does it happen? He's best known for his theories on cognitive development. So cognitive development does just mean, how does knowledge grow? And he's particularly well known for schemas. And I think we're all familiar with schemas. If you want to find out more about schemas, right at the end, I've put a link to our webinar on schemas and how to support them in your setting. So Piaget had a theory that children develop in stages, which is, you know, roughly true. Whether we want to stick to this exactly could be argued, couldn't it? But that generally speaking, that very young children, 0 to 2, are learning through their senses and actions. We know that, don't we? They like this sensory exploration of the world. 2 to 7-year-olds, pre-operational, so they're starting to develop symbolism. And symbolism is very, very important in cognitive development. It's something that only humans can do, really. So it means that we're understanding symbols. That's not necessarily writing, although writing is symbols, but it means that we can think that one thing represents something else, or in role play or small world play, that type of play where it's not the actual thing that we're playing with. We're not actually Peppa Pig driving in her car, but we can understand what that symbolism is, and that's quite a unique thing for humans. But that they are, Piaget thought that children were egocentric, So had really struggled to understand another person's point of view, literally and figuratively. And then you've got the other stages for older children there, which we're generally speaking about EYFS children, so I won't worry too much about that. So I think we would generally agree, wouldn't we, that Piaget's theory about cognitive development, that children, very young children, learn through their senses, and as they get a little bit older, they're beginning to develop symbolic play. This is one of Piaget's most famous experiments, which is called the Three Mountains task. And it's to demonstrate that children are egocentric and literally cannot see the other person's point of view. So in the Three Mountains task, you have a child on one side of the table and sometimes another person or a doll or something on the other side. And the child is asked, what can the doll see? Now, obviously, we know the doll that can see the little house, and she's got a different view because she can see from a different side, but the child can't explain that because they literally cannot see from another person's point of view. You can see this sometimes, you know, if a child has got something they want to show you and they don't understand that they have to turn it round for you to see it. Or they might be asking you to look at something and you're in a different room or you're around the corner and you literally can't see it because you're not there. That's children just don't understand that yet. They haven't developed that cognitive ability. And one of Piaget's thoughts about this is that as practitioners, we need to understand that very young children don't have those abilities yet, and to adapt the way we talk and interact with children accordingly. And then talking about schemas, a schema is a way of building knowledge using these cognitive building blocks to make sense of the world around them. So that we've all seen children, haven't we, where they have a particular schema, which means that they're repeating a pattern of experimentation and play over and over and over again until they've gained all the knowledge they need to know about it. So in this case, this child has a connecting schema and she's connecting up things with tape. And then she might move on to connecting things with string. And then she might move on to connecting things with glue. And then she might do all different types of connecting. You know, it might be bricks, it might be pushing things together. She's just learning. She's building every time she sticks something else together or joins something else together. It's another building block in her schema until her brain has worked out everything it needs to know about connections. As I say, we've got a whole webinar on schemas and how to support them. So if you have a look at the end, you'll be able to see the link for that. So that's a little bit about Piaget. We can see Piaget's influence in the EYFS, in birth to 5 matters and development matters. But how are we using this theory? So in the EYFS, we're seeing it as active learning, children building their own knowledge through exploration and engagement with their environment. We're providing resources that provoke curiosity and experimentation. It's all helping with cognitive development, isn't it, in those building blocks. And that practitioners recognise and support each child's individual learning style. That's in the EYFS, isn't it? And of course, if we're thinking of a schema in particular, each child has their own type of schema and their own, what would the word be? Intensity of schema. Some children's schemas are all encompassing and some are quite subtle. And also we need to think about developmentally appropriate practice, understanding that babies need more sensory experiences and supporting preschool children to learn through symbolic and representative play. So that's things like stories, songs, role play, small world, that type of thing. Now, I've put these 2 pictures in here today. This was last week at my setting, and I thought this was a good example of building your own knowledge through exploration. So the children here have got the fountain and they've put this pipe up against the fountain, so the water's gushing down into a tub. And they were collecting all sorts of things from around the garden and putting them down the pipe and letting the water push them down. And the little girl in the pink is obviously putting her hands up like, why isn't this working? And that's because she had a big zebra that would not slide down. It was just, was it too big? We couldn't work it out. I didn't get involved. I just watched and let them work it out themselves. And they were trying all sorts of different ways to get this zebra to go down the pipe. They turned it round. They tried pushing it with their hands. In the end, they worked out the thing to do was to pour extra water, not just the water from the fountain, but a jug of water too. So they solved that problem themselves. They built their own knowledge through exploration and engagement with their environment. And here is an absolute, really easy, simple example of that. Now we're going to have a think about Bandura. He didn't come up on the slide, though, so maybe some of you may not have heard of him before. Bandura, 1925 to 2021, was a Canadian psychologist. He was really influenced in the behaviour of, influence of others on children's behaviour. So this is called social learning theory, how we are influenced by the behaviour we see in others, how our behaviour changes. And he is best known for his Bobo doll experiment, which is this very weird little clown doll, inflatable clown doll. What happened was they put this doll in the corner of a classroom, and they would send in adults to behave differently to this doll without saying anything to the children. So some adults would go in and they would be very aggressive towards this doll, poor Bobo doll. They would punch it, kick it, push it over, shout at it. And other adults would come in and treat the Bobo doll kindly. And I don't think it will be massively surprised to hear that children who saw or observed the aggressive behaviour also acted aggressively towards the doll. And children that observed kind behaviour also exhibited kind and empathetic behaviour. So for Bandura, that's telling him that children are absorbing the behaviour of others and imitating it. But he took it one step further. He realised that children could also understand the consequence of their actions. Because if they saw a child being rewarded for a particular action, they were more likely to imitate that type of behaviour as well. Interestingly, Bandura also theorised that children understand social learning through stories and role play. When you think of stories like Goldilocks and the Three Bears or Little Red Riding Hood, they are clearly, obviously we're not walking through woods where wolves live, but they are clearly telling children that you have to follow rules or behave in a certain way. And this is what Bandura is telling us, that children learn through these symbolic and representative play and stories, role play, that type of thing. So how are we seeing Bandura's influence in the EYFS and birth to 5 matters and development matters? Well, practitioners modelling the behaviour that we want children to see. We see that in all 3 of those documents, don't we? If we were to go with Bandura's theory, if we model kind, empathetic behaviour to others, that's what the children should imitate. We can co-regulate with children, which helps support their self-regulation skills. We can support children to negotiate and share resources, how to take turns. That's again, in all 3 of those documents, that's listed in there, isn't it? We can use resources such as small world and role play to model empathy, understanding, and self-regulation. So, you know, when we're playing with small world toys and a little animal's hurt, we're talking about it in an empathetic way. Don't worry, we'll help you, we'll be kind. Let's put a bandage on this little squirrel or whatever it is. And that's helping children to learn how empathy works. And through supported interaction with other children, children learn how to make good friendships. We're modelling these friendships, we're modelling cooperation, and we're supporting them to resolve conflicts peacefully, I should say. So this picture is a child that is obviously stuck in the mud, again in my setting, and the other child has come over to help them. And this is a good example of showing empathy that hopefully they've learned through watching me and other people in the setting and other children in the setting be empathetic. So you can understand how if you're in a environment where the adults are behaving aggressively and are not necessarily physically aggressive, but shouting, pushing, anything like that, slamming things around, you can see this is how children understand that behavior works. So we need to model the behavior that we want the children to imitate. Now, Bowlby came up, didn't he, on our Slido. So I think most of you are probably familiar, at least with his theory, if not with his name. Bowlby, 1907 to 1990. He was a British psychoanalyst and a psychologist. And he became interested in the idea of attachment after working with, in the 1950s, what were then called delinquents and children who had been evacuated during the war, so separated from their mothers. He is best known for his attachment theory, which he modified and adapted throughout his lifetime. So I think currently Bowlby does sometimes get some criticism, but actually when you look into it a little bit more, originally he was just talking about mothers, but he did modify and change his theory over his lifetime. So Bowlby's theory states that children need a secure base, literally and figuratively, but initially literally. Babies are driven to form a strong emotional attachment as a survival instinct. I think if you've come to any of my webinars before, you'll know that we quite often talk about how our brain is still thinks we live in a cave with bears and wolves and saber-toothed tigers outside. And so a survival instinct to us is to stick to someone who is going to keep us safe and is going to feed us and is going to keep us warm. That's how we're going to survive. So to do that, Bowlby theorizes that we need a secure base. And when that's the person that they're securely attached to. When a child has this secure attachment, this secure base, they can explore their environment, safe in the knowledge that they can return to their secure base. Now, in this picture, this has happened literally, isn't it? The child is exploring. If something scary happens, they can just turn around and crawl back to mum, to their secure base. But also, it's much more of a figurative secure base that children adapt as they're older. So knowing that there is someone safe that they can come to when they're worried is the key to attachment theory. So as I said earlier, although Bowlby initially considered the mother as the attachment figure, he did later revise his theory. And eventually he theorized that children can have and should have, ideally, as many attachments. Because if this is a survival mechanism, yes, you need to be attached to one person, but what happens if something happens to that one person? You have no one left that's a secure base for you. So if you have a network of attachments, then you have a safety net if something happens to your secure base. Now, I've done a little slide here about the types of attachment. Honestly, you don't have to worry about this, but I thought you might be interested. This is just about the types of attachment and what we might see in practice. So there are 4 types of attachment. There are more, but these are the 4 basic ones. So secure, as we know just now from that picture, the child has a secure base. The child knows they are loved and they are safe. They've received constant care. So in practice, we're going to see a confident child who is able to self-regulate. Obviously, that would depend on the child's age. And they're able to seek support when it's needed. And we just need to be an extra attachment figure that's supporting them and responsive to their needs. And then we have anxious, preoccupied. So see if you recognise some of your children in this and whether this sort of makes sense to you about their attachment. The child wants security but can't rely on consistent care. So for whatever reason, they may not have had a consistent attachment in their early months and years. In practice, we might see a child who seeks constant reassurance. to support this, we just allow the child to stay close and provide that constant care. So we're allowing them to attach to us in the way that the secure child is attached. They've received consistent care, the secure child, and the anxious, preoccupied child hasn't. So if we provide consistent care, we should eventually have that secure attachment. And then we have dismissive, avoidant. This is a child who has experienced emotionally unavailable care. Parents who might be there to do some of the practical things, but for whatever reason, emotionally are not available to their child. So in practice, we might see a child who appears independent, but struggles with any type of emotional connection. One way we can support this is to model and use symbolic play, as we were talking about just now, play and stories to demonstrate emotions and empathy, and to talk about emotions and understand that it's okay to need people and to care for people. And then sadly, we have fearful avoidant. This is a child that craves attachment but is afraid. This can be the result of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, or some type of negative caregiving. I've put caregiving in inverted commas because it's not really giving care if it's negative. But they've had some sort of negative experiences. So we might observe erratic behavior. They might alternatively be clingy and withdrawn. And we can support this with co-regulation and, again, building trust with consistency. The key to attachment is consistency, because the child needs to know that you are always available for them when they need you. So how do we see Bowlby's influence in our key documents that we use? Obviously, the main one is the key person approach. If you're working in a bigger setting, you will know that each child has to have their own key person assigned to them. If you're a childminder just working by yourself, you are that key person. But the key person is the secure attachment for that child in that setting. Someone who knows them really well, understands what their needs are, what their likes and dislikes are, and is available to them emotionally. Transitions that suit the individual child. Now, I think we've done a webinar about transitions. There is a link to that at the end. But this is also really important. If we think of those children's different types of attachment, if we just have a one-size-fits-all transition period, a settling in period, how does that support children that might have a less secure attachment? Some children might just need a lot longer to settle in, mightn't they? We provide responsive care, and we understand the cues from the children, whether that's verbal or non-verbal, because we know those children really, really well. We build a positive relationship, which builds expectations of trust and safety. So there's that consistency again. One of Bowlby's, part of Bowlby's theory is that these early relationships, attachment relationships, set the template for the children's relationships in later life, or all through their life, actually. And I don't know if any of you have worked with children that have had attachment issues. I have, and it can be quite heartbreaking, especially as they get older, to see them replicating the unstable attachments that they had as children, or seeking attachment in inappropriate places. So it's so important that if children don't have that strong, secure attachment at home, that we endeavour to provide that strong, secure attachment in our settings. Evidence shows that securely attached children have better outcomes for resilience and emotional well-being. Now, I think when we move on to Maslow, you will see why. Here we are with Maslow, 1908 to 1970. He was an American psychologist and the founder of humanist psychology. So one thing I really like about Maslow is he focuses on the positives. A lot of developmental theories and psychology focuses on the negative side of things. He focuses on the positive. and he's best known for his hierarchy of needs. I think some of you might be familiar with this when I show you. So he theorizes that in order to proceed to what he calls self-actualization, for children we could call it outcomes, couldn't we? How they move on in their life, all basic needs must be met. And we have to sort of work our way up the hierarchy of needs before we can achieve self-actualization. So he starts off with physiological. That means we need to be fed. We need to have enough to drink. We need to have a warm place to sleep. We need to have clothes. We need to have a roof over our head. And then safety, very, very similar to the attachment theory we were just thinking about, and belongingness and love, that someone loves you and you are secure and you have someone to go back to and you have a place in someone else's life. And then from that, we get esteem. When we're positive, we're giving children positive feedback. And then eventually we achieve self-actualization. And when you think about attachment, you can really see how these two theories go hand in hand, which is actually why I chose Maslow over some of the other theorists I was looking at. So how do we see Maslow's influence in our everyday work? So when we think about the prime areas, we know that PSED and physical development are prime areas that set the foundation for further learning. Safety and well-being are obviously our priority for all of the children in our care. Inclusive practice ensures that children have a sense of belonging. Positive reinforcement raises children's self-esteem, and we're getting children to that self-actualization point where they're ready to move on to transition into formal education and move on to secondary school and, get jobs and all that type of thing. So I got AI to put together Maslow's hierarchy of needs with areas from the EYFS for me. So just to give us a sort of some building blocks to think about, really. So as we said, we need physiological needs first. We need rest, sleep. We need to be in a clean, safe environment. We need to have someone that's going to give us healthy food and physical activity. If we think about the EYFS, it's quite a lot about safety and healthy eating and that type of thing at the moment, isn't there? When we move up to safety needs, we need a key person approach. Love and belonging, we need an esteem, we need positive reinforcement and praise, we need independence and decision making so that children have confidence in their decision making, and we need to celebrate their achievements, and then eventually we're moving on to self-actualization, can't ever say that word, where children are critical thinkers, they're able to have confidence in their own abilities and problem-solving skills. We're supporting all of this, but we have to start at the bottom with these physiological needs, don't we? And move our way up the hierarchy. So they're the things you can see in the EYFS from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Oh, see if I can get my things right. Now, here's the question you've all been asking all the way through this is, why are all these theorists white and male? I was talking about this with my daughter the other day who teaches early years at uni, and she said I should say white, male and dead. I didn't really want to say that on here, but actually I think that's true. They all are, unfortunately. But the truth is there are many other theorists. There really are. So I've picked out a few women. Mary Ainsworth, she moved on and expanded Bowlby's attachment theory and is known for research such as the strange situation. I would definitely have a look at the link at the end, which shows a video of the strange situation. We can see her work in attachment and transitions. Just for anyone who's not sure what the strange situation is, it's being in a room for an experiment. The parent and the child are in the room, and the parent stands up on a signal and walks out of the room, and a different person comes in, and they want to see how the child reacts. Depending on their attachment style, the child reacts differently. It's quite strange to see, and it does look a little bit dated, but it's taught us some things about attachment. Margaret Donaldson She challenged Piaget's theory. Remember, Piaget was saying that children are egocentric and cannot see another person's point of view, literally or figuratively. But actually, Donaldson says when the activity is meaningful and in context, then children are able to do this. And we can see that in the EYFS when we're talking about children playing with what they know and in understanding the world and their immediate environment around them, having things that are in context to them, because very young children can't understand things out of context. Pickler, we also have a Pickler webinar if anyone's interested. The link is at the end. She said that babies are hardwired to develop. They need time and space and responsive care. And we can see this in the recent changes to the EYFS with a focus on specialised care for 0 to 2-year-olds. So we're sort of having to think about how we provide care that is very responsive to those 2-year-olds. And that also, of course, goes with attachment theory, doesn't it? And then the last lady is called, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Raja Hassan. And her theory is that children learn social constructs. So when we think of Bandura, he was talking about social construct, but social behavior. She said that children learn social constructs such as gender and class as they acquire language. So what she's saying there is that the way we talk to children, the language we use towards them, informs how they see themselves and others. And we can really see that in the EYFS when we're having to think about inclusive practice, and also that we should all have high expectations for all children. We should never have lower expectations for a child because of their gender or their class or their ability. We should have high expectations for all the children in our care, because as we saw from Maslow, if you have those high expectations, then the children have high esteem, and that helps them to move on. So that was just a few examples of non-white, or some of them non-white and non-male theorists. But I think I can this is my theory about why they all are white and male, or the big theorists anyway. When we think about development theories in the past, they go back to the beginning of psychology. So we're thinking about the late 1800s and 1900s. So into the 19th and 20th century, we had this in Western society, we had this blossoming of scientific research and theories about what it means to be human, lots of sociology and psychology. And psychology began, and then as an offshoot of that, we get child psychology, and of child psychology, we get child development theories. So I think this explains why so many of the theorists we're familiar with come from this period, because they coincide with the beginning of formalized childcare. So if we think of someone like Bowlby, really up until the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, many children didn't go into formal childcare, or they may have just had a couple of mornings at play school, mightn't they? But as children are more and more in formal childcare, like early years settings, then we obviously need something to underpin how we're working and to guide us all. And so that's why these theorists are important. And research is still going on. So I don't want everyone to think that, oh, okay, well, Bowlby and Maslow, they're all gone, so that's just the theories and we're going to stick with those forever. I spoke to some really useful friends I have in a couple of different universities, and they gave me some ideas about the type of research that is going on at the moment. But it's not these big theories that we see with something like attachment. It tends to be focusing on more specific areas, and also to recognise holistic development, which is really how we're moving towards that in early years anyway, aren't we? So some of the ongoing research at the moment is holistic development, the whole child idea, neuroscience. This one's very interesting, microbiome diversity, which is the study of gut bacteria on brain development. Technology and how technology influences children's development, which is quite pertinent at the moment, isn't it? Mindfulness and mental health in young children is being researched. The impact of socio-economic status and culture on children's development, and the impact of parental experiences on child's development. So that might be something that the parent themselves experience. When we said about attachment theory, if you have a child that has an insecure attachment, what sort of attachment are they going to have with their child when they're a parent? It's quite interesting to think about it like that, isn't it? So there's quite a lot going on actually at the moment. So research is still going on, and that's one of the great things about early years, isn't it? That we're constantly evolving and changing. I just have to say a quick word about the photo because this is my youngest granddaughter, Evie. She took part in 2 cognitive development tests when she was a baby. She looks a bit shocked in this, but I don't think she was too worried about the cat. But this was her at the university having her brain waves tested as she was looking at pictures of toys and animals. So let's sum up. The EYFS brings together research-based evidence, which is currently seen as the most effective way to support children's development. And understanding these development theories and how they underpin the EYFS helps us to support the children in our care. Change can be frustrating, we all know that, but when the EYFS changes, it is usually reflecting current thinking on best practice. And our understanding of how to best support children's development is ongoing and part of our role as a reflective practitioner. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. We've got time for a chat. I'll just put a couple of questions in here to start you off, and then I'll stop sharing. So did you notice any similarities between theories, such as treating children as individuals, providing consistent care, co-regulation, etc.? I'm sure you probably are already doing all these things. Damon will send you these slides. Just before I stop sharing, I'm going to